Okay, so here we are in our third in series looking at Git version control and using it on the Apple Mac through the terminal. Previously, we've looked at what version control is. We've also looked at how you can download Git and install it through the command line in terminal, check versions, delete an older version and reinstall a newer version. Now we're just going to look at how we would track a simple text document. So we're going to be looking at initializing a Git repo locally. Then we're going to do some staging, adding it, and then moving on to making commits. So we're going to have a look at how all that works. Right, so let's get going here. So I'll just close this down. Now, first thing I need to do is create something to track. I'm just going to create a very simple document. So I'm going to open up text edit. I'm going to create just a rich text file. Now it's important, when you are tracking things, you probably wouldn't be tracking Photoshop documents or images. You'd be tracking mostly to do with Git is ideally used for programmers to track changes and work collaboratively on projects. So more or less you're looking at programming languages, scripting, HTML documents, style sheets, that sort of stuff. Maybe some very simple text documents you would track in changes rather than you would track in changes with very large bitmap images, because that wouldn't work. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to type in this line is red, and then I'm going to make it red so we can see the changes and bring it up here. Okay, once I've got that, I'm going to go to File and Save. I'm going to put it into a new folder, and I'm going to call it Git Repo. Again, I've got no gaps in it. I need to spell it right. Okay, Git Repo with no gaps. And then I'm going to put create. And then I'm going to name my document my doc. Again, it can be anything you want to name it. And I'm just going to save it, leave it as a rich text format. And I'm going to save it inside there. So what I'll do is move this over here. I'll bring this in because we're going to be using it later. And here's my what's referred to as a working directory. That's where all the raw files are that we'll be using. Okay, now the next thing I'll do is need to open the terminal. Now I've got my terminal down in the dock. I placed it there. If your one is not in the dock, you haven't moved it there, you can actually do a search and type in terminal and it'll look for it and you can open it from there. It's in the applications. You can drag it to the dock if you're going to use it on a regular basis. I'll just open it up. Now, we've looked at this before when we installed it. It has different shells. So what you can do is open it up and you can go to the shell menu and you can go down and select lots of different types of shells. Now, my favorite one is the homebrew, and here it is. Now, I'll close down the other shells here. Now, if you want to always open with that rather than the default, you would go to terminal, you go to preferences, and you would say, open window profile, and then you can select homebrew. Okay. Now there's lots of other things you can change in here and customize everything if you how things look, and lots of other information in here. We won't go that deeper into. I'll just make sure in future it will open up a fresh shell in my chosen homebrew. Now also what I can do is I'll move this up here. I can press Command and plus, and that will make this shell window bigger so I can see what I'm typing. You make it too big and the text will cut off. You don't want it to be pushing it onto new lines, but big enough to see. Okay, now the first thing I'll do is I'll type in git status, and this will give me the status of what's going on here. Now what it's done is come along and just looked at my whole login. It knows my computer, it knows my login, and it's given me a status for this. So it's just actually done a snapshot of sort of everything that's on here, all my directories, all the hidden files, etc. Now what I want to do is to actually tell it to track my Git repo folder. So I'll just type in clear, and that's a good way of clearing things out. And I'm going to say to navigate to my directory, and then I'm going to initialize it. Now, if you are using Git and you're not familiar with the command line, GitHub, the address is down below for this page, gives you all the keyboard shortcuts, and also it gives you core commands that you're going to be using. We're going to be using this, the CD home directory, in a minute to navigate, but it's got lots of information on here which will help you use the terminal command line. Okay, so I'll just close that down. Now, what I will do is navigate to my Git repo. So it's CD to get the home directory. I do space and the tilde, and then I do / and I do desktop. Now, on an Apple Mac, you can have uppercase D or lowercase d. It's up to you. I'm just going to put lowercase d to make it simple, but it will sort of recognize it, both of them. So what I've done is I've called it exactly, it's on the desktop and it's Git repo, and that's going to make sure that that's going to be the home directory. I press enter or return. Now, how I know it's worked, it said my iMac, and also now it says the directory, which is Git repo, and this is just what login I'm using, and then it's got the $sign. So I know it's done that. The next thing I'm going to do is go Git, and I'm going to put in it, right? That means initialize. Git initialize this folder as a Git repo, and I press enter and return. Then it comes up and tells me it's initialized an empty Git repository and where it is, and also what it's done is put this Git file. The dot means it's invisible. So it's living inside the working directory. It's invisible. You can get it to show things on an Apple Mac, but I've got mine switched off at the moment. And inside there is all the work we do on here. So everything we're doing and updating lives in this Git file, which is invisible. And what that does is when we navigate and open up this project again, it will automatically open this up and show and make available all our updates and commits and everything we've done, which is really, really good when we do a Git status. Okay, so we've done that and it's saying it's empty, which is a bit because we got a file in here. Git will only add files that we tell it to. Sometimes we don't want to add files, we don't want to track everything, so we need to add it, which calls staging it, and then committing it means we've committed those changes to Git. So that's how that works. Now, when you're working, you need to identify yourself. Sometimes Git wants to know who you are, and that might mean if you're working collaboratively, someone changes something, you need to know who's made those changes or who's updated that. So what you will need to do is, I'm going to do a Git config for global user, both for my name and also to do with an email address as well. So I'm going to come along here and go Git. Whoops, I'll just put it here. Git config. Okay, and then there'll be two little minuses, and they're going to put global user.name. Okay, and then I'm going to put my name in speech marks, so I'll just make up a name, Joe Doe, and I do that, and then once I've done that, I'll press return. And this time what I can do is I can sort of copy some of the stuff on here. So I'll go all the way down to user. So I can highlight that. I'll copy it and I'll come down here and I'll paste that in. So it'll save me typing it. But after the way it's got user, I'm going to type email. And then I'm going to put in the email. So I'll put joe@doe.com. Basically, you will need to put in your real email number, but that's how it would work if you're working in a real team or in a real live project. And then I press return. So that's told it to identify me as this user who's updating this, and also to give my email address. When you are actually working on other repos with other people, you also need to go in here and identify yourself too, to get to recognize the changes. Working on yourself, you just do it and you don't need to worry about it too much. Now I've done that. Now what I will need to do is I need to add my file. My document needs to be added. So I'll come along here and I'll go git add my doc.rtf. Now that's a rich text format, and that's the format that this is in. Very important you put the file extension. If it's HTML, you tell it it's a HTML, or a CSS, you tell it what sort of file extension it is. If you don't put that in, it won't recognize it on its own just by using its name. So I've said git add mydoc.rtf. I press return or enter. Now what's happened here again, it's just taken us to another line saying type something else, and it's like, has it added it? How we can find out if it has added it is we go git status, enter or return, and here we have it. It says initial commit. This is a new file. It's called mydoc.rtf, and now this is in the staging area. I've added it to the staging area, and that's a waiting room for me to make a final commit. So sometimes you might have to get all your files ready, then do a commit. Now what I'm going to do is commit this now. So I go git commit, I do a minus and an M. That's for a message, so that gives a message to yourself later what you've added on this file or what you've changed, or if you're working in a team, what you have changed, so all the team members can identify what's going on here. Now what I'll do is speech marks, and I'll say added red text, because I've the first thing I've done here is I've added some red text. Okay, so it's git commit minus M for message, in speech marks the message you want to put a note on it for your update, and then I press enter or return. Comes along and says we're on a master. You can have branches from a master. We just got one master. It'll give a number which identifies what that sort of commit is. It'll give me the message here, and then it'll give me some information about what's changed and the file name. Okay, so we've done that. So we've added our first commit. Now I'll go ahead and go back to my document, and I'll just copy this to speed it up. Put a line underneath here, paste this in, and I'm going to put green on there. I'll just move this out so it is on one line. Highlight that, and I'm going to say, call it green. There we go. And then I'm going to save it. And once I've saved it, I'll go back here to the terminal. I'm just going to clear this out. So I type in clear, enter, return. And I'm going to do another status. So I'll do git status. Now, sometimes when you are working on this, you don't have to keep on doing git status. But when you first start, it's a good idea to have a good idea of where you're up to, or where Git is up to, in where it's put it in the staging areas, what's been committed or what hasn't been committed. Now, it's in red, so Git knows it's been modified because it's tracking it. It wants us to either add, or it wants us to go straight ahead and do a commit. I'm going to, do it a bit long-winded way, and I'm going to add it. So I'm going to come along and go git add my doc.rtf. So I press enter or return. And again, it comes up with wants me to do something else, but I'll just going to go git status. Whoops, I'll just spell that right. Status, so git status and return. And it's come along and realized I've modified it. Okay, so it's in the staged area now. It's changed color where it's red up here. It's been modified. Now it's been modified, but it's actually recognized it's in the staging area. And you can unstage it and take it back to where it was before if you want to, but we'll just carry on now, and we're going to make a commit. So we're going to git commit minus M to add a message. In the speech marks, we're going to put added green text, and then close off the speech marks once I've typed it. Okay, so it's git commit minus M. In speech marks or message, we've added green text, and we press enter or return. Now it comes up again, gives us the code, gives us the message, and tells what's been changed and added. Okay. So what I will do now is just clear this out. So clear. And I'm going to do what's called a git log. So if I go git log, okay, git log, enter or return, this gives us an update of what we've done. So first of all, our first commit was we added red text, and here it is. So it tells us what the commit number is, this massive long number here. Git more or less can only, later on you can only say cut and paste, say 7 of these characters, and it sort of knows what you're talking about or refer to them as that. It'll shorten that long number. So long because basically you're doing complicated stuff to see things don't get lost or corrupted. That's why they do it. Also, it's got my author. I identified myself with the git configure as Joe Doe and my email address. So if other people are working on that, I can come along and say, oh, you know, Joanne Doe has updated this if I'm working with Joanne Doe. Okay, so they're my 2 commits that are on there. So green text tells you when they've taken place as well, which is really, really good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come up here. I'm going to add another line. So I paste in there and I'm going to call this blue. And I'm going to highlight that and I'm going to make it blue. That's important. When you do this, you do save your file, because otherwise if you don't save it, it'll throw Git out where it's tracking it. So make sure I've saved it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out the screen here. So I'll type clear, enter, or return. Now I'm going to come along and I'm going to say git status, right? Again, it's come along and said changes not staged, so that means it hasn't staged it. I need to add it. And again, I could jump and just commit it, but I'm going to go and say, okay, git add my doc dot rtf. So it's git add my doc dot rtf, and you'll see I've spelt that wrong, so make sure you do that, otherwise Git will throw up an error. That's important. You're like, so always make sure you type things right. So it's git add my doc dot rtf, and I press return. Okay, nothing has happened as before, or nothing appears to have happened. And if we go git status again, what it's done is now it's committed it. Well, it hasn't committed it, sorry, it's put it in the staged area, so it's staged waiting to be committed. So changes to be committed, that means it's in the staging area. The other one says changes not staged for commit, so that's not staged. Now we've staged it by adding it. Now I'll just go ahead and commit it. So I'll go git commit, and then my message -m in the speech marks, added blue text. Okay, and close off the speech marks. So just check you've typed that in. Okay, git commit -m, added blue text. I press enter or return. It tells me what it's done and what's been changed, which is, you know, pretty good. It's up to date. Now I'll just clear that out, and I'm going to do a git log, and that gives me everything that's happened. The bottom one is the first one, and the top one is the last commit I've made. Gives me the big long number. Now sometimes that can get very complicated if you've done lots of commits. So what we can do is go git log space -1 line. Okay, so it's git log space -1 line, enter or return. Now what it does here, you'll see it's just put the shorter numbers. I think we've got about 7 characters on here. It's got the a message we put on each of these, so that's more a simplified way of looking at it, rather than this long way which is spread out, which can look very complicated. But all it is the bottom one is our first one, our first commit, which we come along and added the red text. Then we've done our second commit, which is the adding the green text, and the third commit is by adding our blue text. So that is, in an essence, what you're doing with Git. You're initializing a folder for Git to track. Then you're adding files. You're updating those files, and then you're making commits and adds and adds and commits. So that's, in a nutshell, what Git is doing. It tracks things, and you're actually adding messages so you can go back and forward to different times in your project. Now, it's important to realize that Git is not just something, a backup. Yeah, it works as a backup, but more importantly, it captures snapshots of your project at different stages. So you need to have to be really organized and say, yep, I'm going to commit it here, and then I'm going to branch off somewhere else and experiment. But if that experiment doesn't work out, I can come back here. So you can have different variations and try things out, and that doesn't mess up your original project. So that's the way it works. So to be able to use Git properly, you need to be really organized. If you're not organized, Git can be almost pointless or quite a nightmare to use. So you need to have planned your project. You need to be working in a methodical, organized way, because you have to be updating your project, what you're working on, your HTML document, and then coming into the terminal and doing commits and changing things around. Okay, that's how we can initialize, add, commit in Git.